in the sky. It's a bird.
It's a plane.
It's The Never-Ending Battle, the Superman ranking podcast that reviews the adventures of the Man of Steel and his extended family, and ranks them from best to worst. I'm your host, Jordan, and welcome to the 5th episode of the show. Today on The Never-Ending Battle, we have your two favorite heroes together. That's right, we have a world's finest episode featuring Batman and Superman. Now, Superman and Batman are obviously some of the biggest characters in the world with a cultural footprint that transcends time and space and language barriers. I can go about anywhere in the world in the last 80 years or so wearing a Superman or Batman shirt, and people will almost immediately recognize the character's symbols, respectively. So it makes sense for DC to team them up and do so often. The world's finest title itself refers to the old comic series featuring the two characters. That was essentially another anthology series, because funny enough, in the early years of the world's finest comics, Superman and Batman stories rarely crossed over in the actual narrative. They were usually on the cover at best, and it was at worst, usually on the cover, and at best they were a framing device, kind of like the old All-Star comics in the JSA. Now, however, about the mid-50s, they started finally crossing over, because, as we all know, Superman and Batman eventually do become friends and become some of the best friends of comics. And this would be the case for them, Batman and Superman being the best friends. This will largely be the case for Batman and Superman being best friends until Crisis. In the post-Crisis world, the world's finest ends up breaking up and becoming opposed to each other, or at least philosophically, and honestly not very good friends. You can read a lot of the early post-Crisis stories. Batman and Superman are at odds with each other, and we'll see a bunch in the next few weeks in the pod. They're not good friends. Batman and Superman are not very good friends. But what I want to talk to you about today here on The Never-Ending Battle is take a look at 3 different stories. We're going to look at the various points of the history of their relationship throughout the years. I'm going to look at them. And starting us off here in Round 1, Superman Volume 1, number 76. Written by Edmund Hamilton. Pencils by the famous Kurt Swan. Inks by John Fedicini. With no colorist or editor created. Originally published in March 1952. Superman finds himself in a lull in the never-ending battle of truth and justice, and decides to take a little coastal vacation cruise. However, upon arrival, Clark Kent quickly discovers that the cruise liner had double-booked his room, and as such, they would have to bunk with Gotham's own Bruce Wayne. Now, don't fire up the AO theory and other writing utensils and fanfics just yet, friends, because this room has 2 beds. Anyway, Tom never takes a vacation, despite the hero's insistence. And it turns out a jewel heist is taking place on the port that leads to a jewel thief end up hiding on the cruise, and puts the intrepid reporter Lois Lane joining the voyage. This ends up leading to the two heroes having to keep up appearances of their secret identities to keep Lois from becoming suspicious. Superman concocts a scheme for Batman to flirt with Lois in an attempt to distract her, only for the plan to backfire as Lois purposely leans into Batman's attempts to seduce her, causing Superman to work himself into a shoot and get jealous. The issue largely devolves into the duo spending most of their time trying to one-up each other, getting Lois's attention and also the rest of the passengers on the cruise ship's affection. I'm talking like a whole-on Batman and Superman trapeze act somewhere on this ship. I don't know how this coastal cruise ship has room for this, but it has room for it. It's a very wild story. Of course, there's a little matter of that jewel thief, but that's small potatoes comparing to showing Lois that Batman's less of a hero. Either way, the thief is eventually caught, and as his escape attempt via sabotaging the ship and using a helicopter to escape draws the heroes out of their heated rivalry and into a team-up. The secret identities are resolved in the most convoluted manner as you could expect, with Bruce impersonating Clark Kent. That's a first time for that. And the whole bit with Superman pretending to be Batman or flying Batman out. It's a really confusing moment. Really quickly try to wrap it up. Overall, though, it's a charming story. It's about 12 pages. That's a charming issue altogether. Now, thoughts on the comic. What worked and what didn't here? It's a very charming late Golden Age story. This is a comic that actually works fairly well. It's quick and short. It is only about 18 pages, so it's a really short story. And the fact that there's this weird notion of the ship being overbooked somehow that actually forces the ultra-wealthy Bruce Wayne, who admittedly is not a billionaire at this point in time, but he's still, pretty wealthy, is forced to bunk with a reporter from the Daily, not even the Daily, I think it is the Daily Planet by this point. The Daily Planet, Clark Kent is just hilarious. Like the fact that either Bruce Wayne is being cheap or Clark Kent is being more expensive, has more money than he wants to do with. Who knows? Either way, that is funny. The other part I love is there's a bit in the ship. So if you're reading the issue, and this story has been redone a million times by different retellings. There's a famous one that Jeff Loeb and Ed McGuinness did during this Batman Superman. Their Batman and Superman during Batman and Superman run with the Batman Superman Annual #1 that retells the story, but it also gets Earth 2 Deathstroke, and we're talking like Earth 2 as in the bad guy Earth 2, like Ultraman Earth 2, not Golden Age Earth 2. Either way, they're Deathstroke, and that one's like Deadpool. It's weird, but that's not this episode. Anyway, both heroes want to keep their identities. So Clark's trying to keep his identity, while Bruce is trying to keep his identity, and they both turn out the lights whenever the fire breaks out on the dock when the jewel thief is trying to escape. So they both turn out the lights in the room to get dressed, but the fire is so bright through the porthole that it actually illuminates the room, and they both see each other's costumes. It's a silly moment. It's really cheesy, but this is again the first time that Batman and Superman team up. This is billed that way. It's pretty impressive, and it's honestly kind of weird, kind of novel, even at the time. Yeah, there was team up comics. I mean, again, I mentioned earlier, All Star Comics famously had the Justice Society, not the All Star Squadron. It's the Roy Thomas thing much later, but the All Star Comics had the JSA. They never actually directly teamed up. The JSA was just a framing device for them to have a bunch of heroes in the same book that weren't having their own, solo series or features. So it allowed them to bunch a bunch of superheroes in the same comic under the facade of a team. Superhero team ups were just not very common, and this was one of the first big crossovers. And it is played up for seriousness, and it's again 15 pages or so, 12 to 15 pages, not very much. It gets it going, and it finds ways to make it work. There's just other bits I've really liked overall. Is that it's a charming story. It's a simple heist story at the surface, but the heist is literally just a MacGuffin to kind of be a thing to kind of engage the plot. It's mostly about Superman and Batman's relationship, also around vis-a-vis Lois, because this is very much at the point in time where Lois is a going concern. Lois knowing the secret identity. She's always trying to figure out the secret identity. So there's a big bit of ploy to kind of keep the secret identity safe. One of my favorite bits is Superman devising a way to keep Lois off of them by having Batman flirt with Lois. I don't know, it's just silly. And it's something that actually ends up coming up later. And a lot of the other Batman crossovers, we'll talk about one later, for example, that Batman and Lois kind of hit it off every time. And that's because, Batman's a charming dude, Bruce Wayne's a charming guy. And there's a reason why you often see them kind of get paired off together, albeit briefly. She usually can't stand Bruce after a while because, while he is charming, he's still, kind of absent and kind of a jerk. So it's also fun. And also, it's fine. It's a nice little comic. Things that don't work here, there's nothing too awful in this comic. For a 1953 comic, it's brisk. It's got the pacing where it wants to be. It's maybe a little too brisk at times because it is only about 15 pages or so, give or take a couple, that they want to do more than the page count allows, and you can tell they're really kind of overstuffing it. The jewel heist plot is kind of convoluted in terms of he's going to escape by sabotaging the boat, then getting a helicopter. And then on top of that, we have this all this subplot with Lois, the Lois flirt stuff. So they're trying to do a lot. Plus, at the end, they're trying to maintain the secret identities. That's really probably the problem. Really, is that ending is very convoluted. They spend the last 3 or so pages of the story rushing out an ending to explain the secret identities by having Superman fly Batman off to Gotham just for a small appearance over on a building top to make it look like, oh man, Batman's still here. Then he got off the ship earlier than Superman leaving the ship while while Bruce is dressed up as Clark. And it's simple. It's a common trope for the duo. We often see them impersonate each other because of, various shenanigans, and it's fine. Again, not a perfect comic, but hey, it's charming. I enjoyed it. It's well worth looking out to read. As for standout moments, for me, the standout moments of the story, I like the fact that Clark and Bruce again have to share that bedroom, the single room. That's funnier. And again, how not while we're not talking about ranking the Jeff Loeb annual, it actually plays off that story really funny, and I think that works. But that's another episode. But I do like that they overbook the room, and like, how does that even work? All right. And I think that's about it. So it's time to rank the story. So here at the Neverending Battle, we do rank every Superman story from best to worst, along with, the various side characters. And right now our list is standing at 12 stories long. Over here at number 1, the best Superman story of all time is Batman Birthright by Mark Waid and Lionel Francis Yu. The second best Superman story of all time is Superman, A Nation Divided, an Elseworld story that has a lot more going for it than you gotta give it credit for. Third is the post-crisis origin of Superman, The Man of Steel by John Byrne and John Byrne. The fourth best story on the list is the Brainiac trilogy from Action Comics. It's a nice little modernization of the Brainiac stuff, trying to get the post-crisis Brainiac a little bit more in line with the Silver Age stuff and setting up for Panic in the Skies. The fifth best story of all time, of Superman story of all time, is the Rutland, Vermont Halloween crossover that involves the JLA and 2 Marvel comics, Amazing Adventures number 16 and Thor. It's a very interesting one. And the sixth best story of all time is the first appearance of the Ultra Humanite in Superman versus the Cab Protection League way back at Action Comics number 13. The seventh best story on the list is Superman Speeding Bullets, the first Superman Elseworld story that is deeply flawed up until about halfway through the comic. It's fine, but eighth is the Superman, technically like the last pre-crisis Clark Kent story, sort of. It's complicated. It's called Clark Kent Fired. It's from Superman number 410, 412, and 413. The ninth best story is Superman in the House of Mystery, a lovely little Halloween story from DC Comics Presents number 53. Number 10 is Sweet Dreams from Superman Batman number 65. It kind of sucks. 11 is the modern origin of Superman's Secret Origin by Jeff Johns and Gary Frank. I just didn't care for it. And lastly, and the very bottom of the list, is the Superman Elseworld Superman Cowl. It's very pretty, but it's really icky. So where to put this story on the list? It does have a lot going on for it. It's got historical significance. It's the first Batman Zimmer crossover. It's one of the earliest superhero crossovers in general. It's a late Golden Age, almost Silver Age. It's about a year or two out from being Silver Age. I think it's about a year technically, if you want to get DC timeline. But Superman kind of takes a little bit of a late jump into Silver Age. This feels very much Golden Age, though. Let's see here. Definitely think it's better than Superman versus the Cab Protection League, which that is technically significant because it's Superman's first supervillain story. Over at number 6, Superman versus Cab Protection League is a weird little story with the Ultra Humanite, who they try to bill as the first Superman supervillain, but he gets quickly outclassed by Lex Luthor and largely forgotten until they decide to bring him in for JSA stuff. I think he's pretty great there, but here it's fine. I like the comic. Is it better than the Rutland, Vermont crossover? The Rutland, Vermont crossover has some good Superman moments, but largely it's just the charm of being this weird crossover. I think this comic is more enjoyable. I would read this before I read the Rutland, Vermont crossover again. So I will say, though, it's not better than the Brainiac trilogy from the Post-Crisis. I think the Brainiac trilogy from Post-Crisis is more important in modern sense. And while this one's fine, I enjoy it, it's not perfect. I'll read this again, definitely. But I think I'll read the Brainiac trilogy again. I really enjoyed the Brainiac trilogy. So that puts Superman Volume 1, number 76 at number 5 on the big old list here of Superman stories from best to worst. And that brings us to round 2, A Dark Knight over Metropolis. This is a 3-part crossover amongst the Superman titles of the time, so listen close. So this is a post-crisis story very much. So we got Superman Volume 2, number 44, written by Jerry Ordway, with art by Jerry Ordway, and inks by Dennis Yonke. We also have Adventures of Superman number 476, written by Dan Jurgens, with art also by Dan Jurgens, and inks by Art to Bear. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Action Comics number 654, written by Roger Stern with art by Brett Breeding and Bob McLeod. All comics listed here were edited by Mike Carlin and John Peterson, and they were published in April 1990, all within a week of each other. We're very much in a proto-triangle era. So that with that in mind, since this is that proto-triangle era, it's like one of the few, like there's a gap between, and so let's talk about Superman stories. So we have the John Byrne era post-Crisis, where John Byrne is writing Superman until about issue 22, I believe. He gets fed up with DC, storms off, and at the time he's also not only is he writing Superman, he's writing Action Comics for a good chunk of this time, and he even does a little bit of Adventures of Superman, but not long. Most of the Adventures of Superman is done by Marv Wolfman for the first year, and Jerry Ordway for the next year, with Jerry obviously sticking around for the next several years after that. After Byrne leaves the book, we get Roger Stern, we get Dan Jurgens comes in for a little bit here and there, and a couple other writers, and they kind of do their own thing. There's a lot of crossover between the titles. Not too long after that, Superman goes into space, Superman Exile, then he comes back to Earth for some Brainiac shenanigans, and eventually it settles into, well, what we kind of saw last episode with the Brainiac trilogy, this one, and eventually Crisis of the Crimson Kryptonite, and I think there might be one more smaller story in there. But these are where the stories start really crossing over a lot, and we get a lot of long-running soap opera storylines playing out here. This one is very much a big soap opera crossover. It would be about less than a year later we see the triangles get put on the books, and that makes things, one, a lot easier. It's great for marketing. We'll talk about Triangle era books when we finally get a full Triangle era book on here. But this was very much proto-Triangle era. They do some cool stuff. There's a cool cover treatment to all these, where we see the Metropolis skyline with the silhouette over on the book, and it says Dark Knight over Metropolis, and Batman's there. It's a cool way to do it. This was the first time, really, that Batman gets into the Superman books. At the time, we've only seen him in the Superman titles with Man of Steel number 4. It's Man of Steel number 3, sorry. Man of Steel number 3, and Batman's in the Superman Annual number 1 by John Byrne. That's the first time, the only time we've seen Batman in the Superman titles. Now they have crossed over. They did cross over in Legends. They are there during Cosmic Odyssey. That stuff has happened. I mean, they're involved with some of the Justice League stuff, some of the advanced stuff going on. So this is not unheard of that they cross over, but it's a very big deal that Batman's in this book. We're very much in a Batman story, even though really Batman is kind of not necessary. So the plot is, well, it's a sub-opera plot, so there's a lot to break down. The main focus of the plot is really 2 plot lines plus some other subplots that they're mainly there to pay off other stuff, because it's a very soap opera heavy style of the books at the time. The A plot centers around Cat Grant. Cat Grant was involved with the former Intergang boss and Galactic Media CEO Morgan Edge. Morgan Edge is due in court, and Kat is the prosecution's prime witness, as not only was she romantically linked to Morgan at the time, she was witness to a lot of Edge's misdeeds. So she's the main witness there. We also have Clark and Lois as key witnesses, though they are not as critical as Kat. Kat is the key witness here. As such, Intergang is dead set on silencing all 3 of them, but especially Kat. So Kat is actually in police protection, including one of the most famous Jerry Siegel characters, Slam Bradley. We actually see Slam Bradley for an issue, which is nice. He's only there for like a small cameo, but hey, it's nice to see Slam, because he shares a lot of similarities with Superman, and it's pretty fun detective stories. Obviously, Slam gets more involved with the Batman stuff these days, Catwoman. He's Darwin Cook's pet little character for some stuff. Now, Kat herself has actually hired Jose Delgado, aka Gangbuster, who was an ongoing character at this point, supporting character. I love him some Gangbuster. He's very much a late 80s teacher trying to stop gangs, but it's great. Oh boy. I'm reading on the side. I'm reading a lot of the Burn era stuff in order, and getting to the gangbuster stuff's actually been really enjoyable. But beside the point, though. Jose Delgado's over to serve as protection for her and her son's Adam, Cat's son Adam, as their bodyguard, and of course Superman's also looking out for Cat. He's over in the distance, kind of doing some Batman stuff. There's a little bit of a fake out in the first story where you think Batman's there because Dark Knight over Metropolis. It's actually Superman doing the thing. The B plot is the journey of Lex Luthor's kryptonite ring that's introduced early in the Burn era. So we get Lex Luthor famously has a kryptonite ring. It is during the early issues of the Superman run. It's after Man of Steel, so it's pages of Superman. And in the lead up to this storyline and another issue I'll cover another time, it is revealed that the ring itself was stolen by a former LexCorp scientist, Amanda McCoy. Now, and this was happened during the Blackout event. Again, more stuff there. Sorry, during the Brainiac stuff, not during the Blackout, but Blackout. Sorry, during some Brainiac shenanigans. Not the Brainiac trilogy, but some other Brainiac stuff. There's a lot of Brainiac stuff here. Anyway, Amanda McCoy steals the kryptonite ring at a certain point. Amanda McCoy is the scientist who actually deduces Superman's identity, and Lex Luthor pretty much denounces it and ruins her life. It's a whole saga. We'll have to do her story another day. I think it's actually a pretty interesting couple of issues there. But anyway, this is peak soap opera. So there's a lot going on here. But ultimately, the ring that is stolen by McCoy stolen from McCoy during a mugging event, and she gets killed during the mugging, sadly. And that ring ends up in Gotham City. This is how Batman gets involved. An unhoused man has got a hold of the ring, the kryptonite ring, and the ring actually becomes the center of a brawl in Crime Alley that draws the attention of Batman. As the unhoused man who has the ring dies, Batman does some detective work, leading him to go into investigating back to Metropolis to figure out the source of the ring. He deduces it probably does come from LexCorp. And while in Metropolis, he looks into any other strange radiation-related deaths, finding the dead McCoy, though listed as a Jane Doe. Nobody knows who she is. So what ends up having the A and B plot intertwine is Batman enlists Superman into investigating the LexCorp for the missing kryptonite ring, which leads to Superman and Batman discovering not only who stole the ring and figuring out their identity. Batman ends up getting involved with protecting Cat Grant, as there's some stuff going on at a at Lex Luthor's Reporters Gala thing that Intergang attacks an attempt to silence Clark and Lois. Gangbusters also quickly getting overwhelmed by Intergang's hitman, while Batman and Superman are busy dealing with the kryptonite ring stuff. And we end up getting Intergang's shapeshifters and stuff. Intergang's crazy here. We got an Intergang story. It's pretty great. Either way, all sorts of shenanigans takes place. As they go to the press awards event, they get attacked by Intergang as they try to silence Clark and Lois, like I mentioned. We get some fun interaction with Lois, Luthor, and Clark, and Bruce and Lois. All four of them have a really good interplay with each other. But ultimately, the Intergang attack was just a distraction to keep the heroes busy, as Intergang would kidnap Cat. And Superman and Batman quickly moved to save Cat from being brainwashed by Dr. Moon, which is a D-list Batman villain when you don't have Hugo Strange available. But that's beside the point. The heroes quickly dispatch all the foes and save the day. And there's a little bit of a romance between Delgado and Cat, and it's all happy, and it doesn't go well. Cat gets put through the ringer here, folks, over the next few years. But that's not what we're talking about today either. That's another episode. It's another show. Now, at the end, this is a big part of the story. So the Dark Knight of Metropolis, the big reason why people talk about this one, besides being like the first real Batman story in Superman comics post-Crisis, is that this is where Batman actually starts developing trust in Superman. He gives Superman the ring, the kryptonite ring, and he has that ring the entire time. Superman doesn't know this. When he gives Superman the ring as a sign of trust, thinking he doesn't need to worry about Superman anymore. I don't need a space rock to keep you at bay. Now, Superman promptly returns the favor and gives the ring back to Batman. as basically insurance. Because at this point in time, but even this point in post-crisis, Superman had been mind controlled like 5 times, a lot. He made adult videos. That's a whole storyline for another episode, but that's a thing. So, yeah, Batman should keep the kryptonite, and that's what Superman thinks. It's also a sign of how much he trusts Batman to do the right thing as well. So we get the origin of how Batman gets the famous kryptonite ring. I honestly have no clue how Luthor gets it back by the 2000 storyline where Batman steals it again. But hey, I'll figure that out. That's another episode. All right, so this is a large storyline. It's kind of hard to break it down plot wise because, again, it's a very soap opera thing. So, what worked and doesn't work here? What I think worked really well for the Dark Knight over Metropolis is, despite being in the middle of this overarching plot involving the trial of Morgan Edge and Cat Grant's safety, before getting to the witness stand, this series is surprisingly accessible. This storyline is, you could read it cold. I read it cold, ice cold, years ago. I had no idea outside the basic stuff that is post crisis, and I picked up on it pretty quick. You didn't need to know who Gangbuster was. You don't need to know much about Intergang. I mean, it helps as you're reading. As I've been reading through some of the Kirby stuff as well. Intergang's making a lot more sense. I'm getting a deeper appreciation for all this. But in reality, it's not that bad, and I think it's pretty palatable, pretty accessible, pretty good to go there. There are elements in this comic technically going all the way back to the second issue of the John Byrne run. So we're talking about Superman number 2, and we're in Superman number 44. So there's 42 issues of story plus annuals in here, and despite that, it's actually pretty easy to approach. So I can't help but appreciate that. There's even actually a really cool narrative devices to kind of help that out. Is this, knowing that this storyline is crossing over between 3 different series, and they were marked part 1, 2, and 3, but this was pre-Triangle era. There actually is a nice little bit of a narrative device to do a recap page in each issue. It's basically news reports and news clippings, or like memos of the Intergang, and they basically give a little synopsis of the prior issue, and that's to kind of help bridge some of the plot gaps that take place, because it's supposed to take place in kind of real time. And it does fairly well, and those recap pages are really nice. I know DC's kind of averse to recap pages, and in some ways I'm not a fan of recap pages, but when they're done well, I think they're really useful and really impressive, especially if you have a crossover like this, or if you have a book that's coming out every week, but not everybody's read it every time. Maybe missed the last issue because their shop didn't get it. Hey, you can at least fill in and kind of jump in. I like these. Other things I really liked about this comic, and I think worked really well, is I like that seeing Slam Bradley here, doing another creation that was actually a frequent feature in Detective Comics that was Batman. Again, doesn't mount to anything in the story. It's just a nice little Easter egg to see here, and I think it works really well. The beautiful thing also I really liked about this kind of storytelling, the soap opera style storytelling, and this goes for a lot of comics I have deep affection for this time, especially the Triangle era of Superman. That comes out a little bit later than this, is that allows for a greater focus on just I call it soap opera elements, where there's a lot of subplots and a lot of things going between issues. But because it is pretty much treated as almost essentially a weekly series, it allows you to give these different introspections. Like, we get a lot of time with Cat and Gangbuster. Like, nowadays, I don't think you would get an issue, or not an issue, but several pages devoted to Cat Grant's feelings about things, or Jose Delgado. Nobody's caring about the Gangbuster these days. Nobody's on top of that guy unless he's presented as a joke. Here he's presented as an honest human being, and we see a lot of introspection. We see a lot of cool stuff here. I think it's really great having these overarching storylines. It does make for a convoluted read. If you're jumping between issues and jumping in and out of storylines, like especially for this podcast, as I try to do things non-chronologically. That said, they do a really good job keeping you up to date. They kind of fill you in. It's like a soap opera. Soap operas do that. They do that really well. The first week, Monday would be the big event. Tuesday, maybe something small. Tuesday through Thursday, some kind of small happens. Friday, a big event. But each episode kind of recaps a little bit of what the previous episode did. It's a sequential style storytelling and episodic style storytelling that we don't see much these days in the era of streaming and comics that are written for the trade. You just don't see that, and it's really nice when it comes out and you come across something that's written well. When it works, and it works great. Obviously, there's times when it doesn't work, and it's miserable, and there's a reason why they don't do the Triangle era anymore. And every attempt to kind of recapture that magic kind of falls flat on its face for DC, even if they try really well. I don't know, I just really like seeing it play out here. The other thing I thought was interesting, what worked really well, I've gone through the various back issues, and this is the first real substantive direct team up between Batman and the Man and the Dark Knight and the Man of Steel. I've been looking through it. Now there's obviously one-off stories. There's the Superman Batman not Superman Batman. The Superman annual I mentioned earlier. They found a vampire. It's got like amazingly it's not very great art, but it's got Art Adams art, which is really a young Art Adams. It's kind of rough, but it's got Art Adams art. That's impressive. But there's a crossover there. That's a pretty, that's a direct team up between them. They are in Legends. They are in Millennium together. They're in Cosmic Odyssey together, but they're not really directly teaming up. They're usually a part of a larger ensemble. And this is the largest outside of like what would come out about a little bit at the same time, which would be Dave Gibbons and Steve Rude's World's Finest, which is another episode I really want to get to soon. That would be the next big, really substantive team up between the two, and that one's an interesting story altogether. That's again another episode. That comes out around the same time this crossover, Dark Knight over Metropolis, wraps. That's another one for another time. I like that story quite a bit, though. We have to find an episode for that one, either another World's Finest episode or even the Christmas episode. I think it's a Christmas comic. But either way, what's interesting is this is the first really big team up. And if you read a lot of the stuff, like we'll do Cosmic Odyssey in a few weeks, Superman's a little catty to Batman. He's a little snappy. He's like, that guy. Look at Batman here. You call him Batman in? Good grief. There's a little bit of antagonism there. But here the dynamic has markedly improved between the two. That's actually one of my biggest pet peeves about post-crisis was this decision to make Batman and Superman more antagonistic to each other, less friends. It's just whatever. You don't want them to be best of friends. Fine. But like openly like antagonistic and questioning each other's motives, I don't know. I just don't really care for that. And it is nice to see that kind of get reversed here. So we're not seeing a lot of that burn antagonism. We're getting a lot more friendliness. There's a lot less. There's tempering of that uglier aspects of the Byrne relationship, and especially the Frank Miller one. Oof. Now again, they're not BFFs in this comic by any means. We'll see that in the next story we talk about. They're much more BFFs there. Hell, I wouldn't call them acquaintances here. But they are definitely more cordial and respectful to each other compared to previous crossovers. And this is the issue. This is a story that kind of sets up their trust in each other. And it sets the stage for what we're going to see later on as we talk about more and more World's Finest and more Superman Batman crossovers. They become a lot more trusting and dependent on each other. The last thing I think worked really well here is the interdynamics between Lex, Bruce, Clark, and Lois. All four of them have an interesting dynamic with each other. Dan Jurgens is the one who wrote that issue. That happened specifically in the Dan Jurgens issue. And he really captures a voice for all four of them and does so really well. And all the connections are unique. Like how Bruce and Lex really don't like each other. And that goes back to the earliest days of stuff. They do not get along. But we also see like they have competing business interests. But we also see, Clark and Lex. Lex actually likes Clark, which is really interesting of a dynamic. Lois thinks Clark's kind of a wuss, but respects him. Bruce hits it off with Lois. I mean, all this stuff kind of goes off. It's great. I like it. Now, ultimately, what doesn't really, I think, work here, and this is the honest truth, is that Batman going to Metropolis, while a lot of fun, there's no reason for it. The reason Batman's there is to figure out the source's kryptonite ring. It has nothing to do with the Intergang's plot line. The Intergang is the A plot, essentially. based on how much time it takes up, and they team up to help stop the intergang stuff. But at the end of the day, it's it doesn't. I mean, there's no reason for him to be there for the ring. The Kryptonite ring plays second fiddle to interfang stuff, which again is fine. It just makes it a more contrived reason, and it's just kind of trying to explain where's this ring gone. And again, the issue leading up to this that kind of sets up the ring disappearing, the mugging, kind of explain like it needs to be resolved. But like seriously, like this is why they're there. But there at least some cool bits, at least the trust building. I don't know. It's contrived. Ultimately, it doesn't work. I think that part of the plot, it's just kind of lost in the sauce of all the Superman stuff going on. Again, that's the downside of having all the soap operatic elements. You have a lot of stuff going on, and it's just really, really hard to do this with everything going on. So, I think it's time to rank it, though. Now, as you can tell, I really enjoyed this story. I think it's actually really good. It's got its flaws. It's art. I should mention Art Taber, the inker. Art Taber sucks, the human being. He's a comic skater and crap. Sadly, he inks a lot of these 90s Superman comics, but hey, we gotta deal with what we gotta deal with. But overall, the art's really good. The writing's solid, pacing, I love the elements there. It's not the best Superman story of all time. Excuse me. By any means, and nor is it the best Batman Superman team up, by all means. We'll see that as well. But of the stories on the list, I do think it's better than the Rutland Vermont crossover. The Rutland Vermont crossover is up this high just because I really like the novelty of it, and it's enjoyable and fun. But this one has more consequence. This is the big post-crisis trust building exercise between Batman and Superman. It's not as good as the Brainiac trilogy, though. The Brainiac trilogy, again, I just really like the Brainiac trilogy, and I can't wait to read more of the Brainiac stuff as it comes up. I'm getting close to that amount of outside of reading as I get through this the Byrne era. We're getting really close. So that puts it here at the new number 6 on the list. So that puts Dark Knight over Metropolis right there at number 6. It's a really good story. I recommend checking it out on the DC Infinite app or anywhere else. There's actually a really cool collection that actually includes the Superman Batman. He's saying Superman Batman annual. The Superman annual number 1 by written by John Byrne, but art by Art Adams. It also includes the kind of the prelude to this with the whole how the scientist gets the scientist with the ring and actually confronting Superman about it. I think it's Superman number 43. It's a really good comic, really good stuff. If you can find that collection somewhere, I highly recommend checking it out. But if not, it's worth looking up on the DC Infinite app or even the back issue bins. I imagine it's not that hard, not that expensive. It's like a big deal, but not that big of a deal. And that brings us to the final story of the episode. Batman Superman World's Finest, The Devil Nezha. Try my best with my pronunciations here. Originally printed as Batman Superman World's Finest, numbers 1 through 5. Written by Mark Waid, with art by Dan Mora, colors by Tamara Bonvallen, cut letters by Adita Benhir, edited by Paul Kaminsky and David Wagalski. Published March to July of 2022. Probably the newest story on the list, if I recall. Alright, this one is got a lot going on here. Despite being a simple 5-issue story, there's a lot of layers to this. So this is set during the earliest years of the World's Finest team up. We get Batman and Superman early on we get Batman and Superman teaming up to stop Poison Ivy and Metallo, of all people, from wreaking havoc on Metropolis. This story, by the way, was originally printed in the Detective Comics number 1050, but it's pretty much the same as World's Finest number 1. It's just credited both. So if you read Detective Comics 1050 and go, what the heck this is? I remember reading this. That's what that's about. Either way, it's an odd pairing with Poison Ivy and Metallo, and you're right. But either way, before Batman and Superman can kind of get to the bottom of it, Metallo ends up attacking Superman with a dart full of red kryptonite, like shards. It's really weird. Again, for those who don't remember the kryptonites, red kryptonite's the one that makes Superman's powers go crazy and act weird. It gives Superman new powers and delusions, often random. It's not predictable. Anyway, the attack of being full of kryptonite shards mean he's constantly getting varied power surges with new powers and old powers and overpowers going on all at once. This leads to the Superman and Batman needing a team that specializes in the strange and bizarre, and Batman knows just the right person to call, and he calls in the Doom Patrol to help save the Man of Steel. We're talking like classic style Doom Patrol. So we end up having Chief and Negative Man performing surgery on Clark. Well, the Negative Man actually acts like a red sun to kind of keep Clark in bay, and allowing the Chief to do surgery to kind of remove the kryptonite shards from the bloodstream. Don't know how that works. Um, Either way, the Doom Patrol identify the mastermind behind all of these events. That's kind of overseeing all this shadowy force, overseeing all these villains, kind of getting their crap together. And that's that devil. It's known as the Devil Nezha. Again, trying my best with my pronunciations here. Either way, the devil is an ancient evil that was recently sealed and has somehow became unsealed from his tomb. Again, for me, average reader, like us, like I am, Nolza is just a name. But if you're more worldly out there, you may recognize that is a character from Chinese folklore, especially if you recognize Nolza as a character from The Journey to the West, the classic Chinese story. There have been two high-profile animated movies about the character since this comic's release. That may sound familiar. They're on Netflix. Or some of the highest grossing animated films of all time. Just to let you know. And also, but if you're like me and know The Journey to the West is also the basis for Akira Toriyama's Dragon Ball, then you may be surprised that Naza actually relates closely to the character Chaozu. As in, they're not one-to-one, but Chaozu is Naza. So keep in mind when we're talking about this devil Naza, we're talking about the characters similar to Chaozu. The little tiny white pale emperor thing from Dragon Ball. Tien's friend. It's interesting. Anyway, enough of that tangent. So Naza seems to be actually rallying the villains around the world, and the Justice League is really struggling to hold the line here. And of course, that looks like a job for Batman and Superman. They step up. They decide to make it. They also make a plan with Supergirl and Robin. They go back in time because Supergirl has the ability to fly backwards in time because we're very Silver Age here. To figure out how Nutza was originally sealed in his tomb. We'll talk more about them in a minute. The battle between the villain and the leagues is not going well, as not only Nutza coordinating the villains, but also amps their abilities to like a higher level because you get magic. So on top of that, also on all this, it's becoming clear that Notza's influence is growing and actually begins to even conscript members of the Justice League themselves, including Hal Jordan, who's probably one of the most powerful members of the Justice League in terms of just raw power. So with it quickly becoming insurmountable in the fight against Hal Jordan, Superman and Batman take a stand against the Green Lantern with Notza's influence. And Batman hatches this most unorthodox plan to stop the GL, and that is combining both Batman and Superman's willpower to overcome Hal's compromised willpower, because he's under mind control, so he's compromised. The plan works and results in the fusion of Batman and Superman and Green Lantern, and this really unique, essentially fusion ring event that neutralizes. The fusion quickly neutralizes the Justice League and puts everything out, but the ring power is what's controlling them. And when the ring powers fades out fast, the fusion fails, and Notza takes the upper hand against the heroes, at least until Supergirl returns from the past to give a knockout blow to Notza. And then we learn more about what happened at the time with Supergirl and Robin. Supergirl and Robin's trip to the past to learn how to stop the devil is revelatory, but they realize that it has to come to a great cost. Someone has to sacrifice themselves to steal Naza into the chamber from the inside. And while they're flying back from the past, Supergirl and Robin are trying to figure out who's going to have to make that call. Robin falls off of Supergirl into the time stream, and She is distraught, knowing that Robin is lost in the time stream, knowing that what has to be done, that has to seal Nezha. So Supergirl kind of goes on a death wish, kind of a la Crisis on Infinite Earths number 7. She offers to be the sacrifice, so she quickly tries to quickly degrade Nezha and put him in the chamber. Obviously, Batman and Superman won't allow it, but while fighting over the matter, actually gives time for Nazha to overwhelm Superman. At this point, we play the never-ending battle drinking game, and every time Superman gets mind controlled, you take a drink. You're gonna take a lot of drinks in this podcast. Happens all the time. Anyway, things get heavy with Batman and Superman, Batman and Robot Man and Kara. Kara. Is it Kara or Kara? Supergirl struggle to stop the demon's influence. Demon influence Man of Steel and the rest of the Doom Patrol, but we happen to learn that Nazha has a weakness: modernity. Basically, modern technology actually really stops him, along with Batman's patented electric knuckles. They make quick work of the demon and allow Superman to bring him to become free. Superman kind of hatches a plan to put him in the Phantom Zone projector. And that's going great, except for we learned that's when they learned that Kara lost Robin in the time stream, and that's not fun. Oh yeah, of course there's like 14 pages left in the comic, so Nezha won't go down that easy. And he escapes the Phantom Zone like his name is Super Boo from the Boo Saga. He manages to will himself out of the Phantom Zone, creating a hole in reality. Superman says, screw this, rushes the devil into the tomb, takes the mystical rune with him, seals in the temple from the inside to seal the demon away. This leads to Batman and Kara losing their crap over losing their love. No joke, that is their line. Batman sees him as, the deep platonic love, brotherly love. And of course, Kara sees him as family, the only surviving family member. They're both distraught. But of course, Batman's a skeptic, and he realizes that Superman had a plan, which was to actually send himself into the Phantom Zone after sealing the chamber, then escaping through that hole in reality that Nezha left behind. Again, it's always fun to see Superman be really smart in the stories. Superman's a really smart character, and sometimes you don't give him credit for it. And with that, Nezha is sealed away forever, at least until Damian Wayne shows up during Batman vs. Robin, and we get Lazarus Planet. But that's not this show, nor will it be, unless for some reason we feel like talking about it. I guess I do need to talk about with John Kent being a part of that, but hey, we're not worried about that. Anyway, Batman and Superman resolve to rescue Robin. That's again another episode, because that's another arc, another one-shot story, and the story comes to a close. Alright, let's talk about what works here. First off, I love Dan More's art. It's the super clean kinetic stuff that he's known for. He's unrivaled in the industry today. There's a reason why he's a hot commodity. He's drawing like too many comics. I don't know how he does it all. And on top of Dan Moore's clean art, we have Tara Bonvillain's amazing, brilliant colors that are beautifully saturated, that kind of sing and really put this book up on the next level, kind of capture this Silver Agey vibe without being four color nostalgic throwback. It is still very much a modern looking comic with its way it's shaded in the tones, but it has this nice saturation level that just really pops. And on top of that, we get this really fast-paced plot because Wade is writing a really fast-paced, brisk-moving story, and Dan Moore is nailing the kinetic fury. So it comes as no shock that this is just really well, and I really like how Mark Waid writes the Superman-Batman dynamic. It's of the stories tonight. This is probably the best realized one. It helps that this is not really a first meeting, or they're not adversarial at this point. They are definitely more friendly, and much more in line with the Silver Age story versions of the character that we see later on. They're much more chummy. I mean, there's a bit where Batman is distraught that he lost his best friend, and he thinks he's gone forever. And of course, obviously, the skeptic, he quickly realizes it. But he is distraught over that. And I don't think you would see that in the immediate post-crisis era that we were just talking about in the previous story. Here, it's played off pretty serious. Obviously, we know it's not going to last because there's another issue coming out, but dang, it's wild. So yeah, it's not really a surprise. Again, Wade gets Superman as well. Wade is an amazing Superman writer. Oddly enough, he does not do a lot of solo Batman stuff. We do get the Batman and Robin Year One storyline that came out recently, but like he doesn't do a lot of Batman comics solo. He just does it with either Superman or the Justice League. So it's worth mentioning there. But Wade does a really good job. This book represents Mark Waid's big return to DC after what I feel like was a lackluster Marvel run. Don't get me wrong. Uh, there's some good stuff in that Marvel run. He did write Avengers. He wrote Champions, and again, Champions fans don't come at me. I just always liked Mark Waid better at DC than he is at Marvel. I know he's got some big Marvel books under his name. His Fantastic Four run is justifiably lauded. Obviously, Marvel's with Alex Ross, but man, I could just hit after hit at DC. You got the Flash, you got the Justice League, you got Birthright, the best story on our list. You get the Batman Superman World's Finest. You got Justice League United. It's JLU. You have 52. You have all sorts of little one-off stories and stuff like that, and all these cool little tie-ins. And he was an editor for a while there. And Kingdom Come, which we got to get to eventually. He just kills it. And Mark Waid is just so much of a better writer, and I love to see more of that. And I love that this book's been going on for a long time. I didn't think this book was going to make it to 50 issues, and it's about to hit 50 issues as of this recording. And it looks like it's going to keep going. And like every time I think, oh man, we're going to wrap this up soon, he's still got more to tell. And you know what? That's awesome. More of that. Also, really like the use of Doom Patrol. Waid using Doom Patrol here is obviously the much more Silver Agey version of the Doom Patrol that you would see, like that's often associated with not the Morrison era. But it's a nice throwback feel. One, it fits in better with the mode of the comic we're trying to get here. But two, and this is most important to me, it's the team of the weird. And while Niles is a terrible person and a chief, he's not like this manipulative guy. He's not Machiavellian here. He's just a weird dude in a wheelchair. So I think it works really well. Again, I haven't read much of this actual run. This was one of those, I got really back into comics at around 2000. And I was mostly buying Marvel, buying some DC stuff. I was getting Superman, so I have a lot of the Superman stuff at that time. But I was a little skeptical because Mark Waid kind of wore out his welcome with me at Marvel stuff I was reading from him at the time. And when he came back to DC, and I was like, I'll check it out eventually. And I did pick up the first issue. I kind of regret not buying it now and buying up the whole series because it's legitimately what I've read. It's been one of the best comics. So I'm kind of eager to see how this goes. I'm curious also to see how this stuff picks up in Batman versus Robin and Lazarus Planet. I am actively reading DC now, and I was actively reading when Lazarus Planet came out, but I still kind of don't read the events as heavy. And Lazarus Planet was just like, oh, that's cool, I guess. We got like some animal people. What's going on in Superman this week? I do need to check it out eventually. I do have the DC app. I should read it. I'm curious how it goes. Now, overall, this comic largely works top to bottom. What doesn't work? I don't really care for the composite Superman Batman. Composite Superman with the Green Lantern ring is a neat concept. It's a nice way to do that. I love that it's got like this Patara fusion thing going on. I love that it has kind of ties to the Dragon Ball stuff going on all around. It just, man, it buries Hal Jordan. I get he's mind controlled by Nuza. I can never get that name pronunciation right, but come on, dude. He gets his power gets bullcraft out of it with Bat-God. I don't know about that. I do like how Superman, the best part of the story, the standout moment in the comic, is Superman using his wits to actually outsmart Nuza. I can never say it right. Outsmart the character using the Phantom Stone projector stuff. But also, it was really cool to see Batman willing to sacrifice himself to save Superman. It really captures these emotional beats going on. I really think that works really well here. All right. With that said, I believe it is time to rank this story. So, definitely the story of the night. With that in mind, it goes up pretty high. The question is it better than Man of Steel? And as much as I like the story, and I do think the Waid stuff's a lot better than no offense to Byrne, I do like Waid a lot better as a writer. I cannot put this in good conscience above Man of Steel. I have my issues with Man of Steel, but Man of Steel is definitely just, I don't know, it's growing on me. But the issue I have with it is still, fails in comparison to the fact that it is a historical event. This is the big revamp of Superman. I think Birthright is better, obviously. Nation Divided, it just tells a much interesting story. Man of Steel is just the hard limit. I think we're going to have a hard time finding stories that overcome Man of Steel, just for the historical significance of it all. So with that said, I do believe this is the new number 4 on the list, and that is Batman Superman World's Finest, the Devil Nezha. And I've got to get that pronunciation out for the next time I read this list. Ugh, watch a lot of videos. I can say Mixaplick, but I cannot get that one right. All right. With that said, we have wrapped up this week's episode. So real quick, just kind of go through some post-trap here. I want to thank you all for joining me on today's show and walking as we go through the evolution of comics' most important friendship. The Never Ending Battle releases most Fridays on your podcast platform of choice. Admittedly, I've been kind of slack. So this episode is the first episode I've recorded since the new year. A lot has happened. While the episode did come out in January, that was after the new year hit. I've been kind of saddled with sickness. January was kind of busy with school and stuff and just sickness there. February, flu, strep, all sorts of stuff came through the house. And even most of March. Like, I wanted to record this episode 2 weeks ago, and I got sick really bad with walking pneumonia and then strep throat again. It's been a rough one. So thanks for sticking out with the show. I'm trying to get things ordered. I'm getting things kind of prepped. That's kind of the big thing. While I've not been able to record episodes, I have been stockpiling reading and writing on it, and I'm trying to streamline the workflow. So, again, the goal is to release most Fridays on your podcasting platform of choice. You can always find a companion article of this episode with some art from the comics and other relevant material on extremelyuncanny.com. You can follow the show over on Blue Sky at NEB Superman at bluesky.social. You can find my comic reviews for the Comics Beat each Wednesday, either on the Marvel Rundown or Wednesday Comic Reviews. Don't forget, if you like the show, be sure to rate and review it and tell a friend. It really does actually help the show grow. And next week, it is April Fool's, and we are going to take a look at 3 Superman Joker stories as we go through how the Man of Steel deals with the Clown Prince of Crime. This is Jordan signing off. As always, never surrender in the never-ending battle for a better tomorrow. Take care.